Bro, y'all know that I'm training for this ultra, right? This 55-hour deal. And by the way, thank you, Roger, Roger's sister, Josh, Warren Darlow, thank you, Darren, my mom,
That's
and Scott.
Dan.
Yeah, I know. that's when he put himself down. So thanks everybody for the donation. But the reason I was a little late getting on is we've got a little doggy gate set up for the puppy. Dude, I'm stepping over it instead of opening it, and I fell and busted my knee. It's like one of those things where you fall and you're like, it doesn't hurt yet, but in a second the pain's gonna hit. You stub your toe and that pain is instant. But man, my knee hit the floor so hard it rattled the house. I'm like, oh, please, God. So my walking's not affected. This happened 10 minutes ago. My walking's not affected, but dude, my knee is starting to swell up. Take a picture of it. It's contusion. But
you're gonna go take them tight ass jeans off.
I know, my skinny jeans.
Hey, wait till tomorrow, man. At least it wasn't like me, because we got the same thing. We got the little gate set up.
Yeah,
keeps the dogs on my side of the house. So it was like, I don't know, midnight, 1 a.m, and I probably had a couple, and I tried to step over it, and dude, I'm telling you, I cleared my feet. It just cleared the floor. I landed straight. I had my I went to go break my fall, so my fist was on my chest. And dude, it was like potatoes, dude. It was just thud, right? And then my son comes out. He's like, "What's going on?" I think he's got his gun, thinking somebody's breaking. Dude, I hit the ground that hard. He comes in, he's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I'm just like, He's like, "You all right?" And I said, "I think." He's like, "All right, I'll see you in the morning." He left me laying there, dude. It felt like it was 10 minutes. I laid there. I'm like, this is gonna hurt. And then the next day, dude, I had this bruising on my pectoralis minor, because I don't have a pectoralis major, but I had a bruise on my pectoralis minor, dude. It had to be there for at least 2 weeks, at least.
He's been known to do that. He's been known to do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. I think. Well, the joke's on him. He thinks there's an inheritance there, so he's like, if Pop's passed away, what he doesn't realize is that the wife has already spent it all. So sorry, kids.
Well, Josh, we really want to get Josh going on this one. He's pretty excited. And Ted and Jer, y'all are just going to have to deal with it for the next 5 to 10 minutes, because we're going to talk a little bit of sports, because I think Josh needs to rant a bit. It's been a little time. It's been a week or two. He's already shaking his hand. So, Josh, Florida State, dude, undefeated in the ACC. They didn't have too much of a slouch of a schedule. They did play some high schools, a couple. But otherwise, I mean, they beat some good teams. They did everything they were supposed to do. Third string quarterback comes in, didn't look great, but that defense showed up. And then tell us what happened and give us your thoughts.
Hey man, they had practiced. They were all dressed up, and they didn't get a date to the dance. Like you said, they did everything they were supposed to. They won all their games. They won their conference championship. They're a Power 5 school in a Power 5 conference, and they did not get selected to go to the playoffs. I personally, and granted, I'm a little biased, lifelong Florida State fan, born and raised Tallahassee. And it was just absolutely criminal. Absolutely criminal. And it didn't make any sense. The whole college, football playoff committee, when they came down to their reasoning, they said, well, Florida State lost their quarterback, so they can't compete with, any of the the top 4 schools in the rankings. It's like, okay. So, I get it. Yeah, Florida State, they lost Jordan Travis, and they lost Jordan Travis against an FCS opponent. It was I believe their one FCS team that they played this year, but they opened up against LSU, who was ranked, and they were in the upper teens. They were in the lower teens when they opened up first game of the season, and and again, they beat them. They beat Florida, so they beat a couple of SEC teams, during the season. They beat all the ACC teams that they played. But when you look at the reasoning, you're like, okay, let's go down that road. Let's talk through that. So you're telling me, so at the end of the season, Florida State was ranked number 5, and Georgia was ranked number 6. So by that reasoning, using their logic and saying, well, Florida State wasn't good enough to compete with Washington or, Alabama. Okay. So you're saying that Florida State wasn't good enough to play Washington or Alabama, but they were better than the team who had just been ranked number 1 for the last 2 years? Are you serious? But you're going to throw that logic out. Okay. It made no sense. Dude, there's the college football playoff committee, and their supporters and the Kirk Herbstreits and everybody, they have had a long disdain and a long hate for Florida State. A lot of them, they just, Florida State draws that ire for some reason or another. But the real tragedy is not them not being able to play, in the playoffs and compete, potentially for the national title, but it's what it's done to the team since then. They've had over a dozen players enter the transfer portal. They've had, I believe, about 10 declare for the NFL draft, simply because, they know, hey, my time is, I'm not going to, I can win every game here. I can, my team can win every single game, and they're not going to get to play for the national title. I'm not going to get to play for the national title. I'm not going to get the exposure to the NFL scouts that I need to have so I can go on and, do bigger and better things. And so they're leaving. And, some people are kind of, some people are upset with them. Some people are saying they're, not loyal to the program and, all of this. I don't begrudge them at all, because why would you stay somewhere where you're not going to get the exposure that you need to, better position yourself, for a career? So, the ones entering the transfer portal, hey man, no one is going to take care of you better than you. And, at the end of the day, I wish Florida State would boycott the bowl game with Georgia. I wish they would get with Georgia and not show up, because I think Georgia got done dirty too. It's like that team's been they've been number 1 for 2 years. And now you're, all of a sudden they lose one game and you're saying that they're number 6. I think that's I don't think Alabama is better than Georgia. They beat them in one game, and now they're like, oh, well, now you're better than them. I don't think that's the case at all. But it's getting expanded to 12 teams next year, so it doesn't matter what they do this year. The only people who are going to remember it next year, one of y'all said it, the only people who are going to remember this next year is me and the rest of the Florida State fans who got done dirty.
I'll remember it, dude. I think this is ridiculous. I think it's absolutely.
We're gonna have this happen again. Even with 12 teams, it's gonna happen again.
Somebody will miss it on the bubble, but if there were 12 teams this year, it would have solved this particular issue. But you're right.
Oh yeah.
Eventually, it's gonna come up again. The whole thing about the quarterback getting injured and that being a reason, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. So what are these schools going to do in the meantime? Somebody gets injured during a game. They find out the person's injured after the game, right? Concussion protocol, all this stuff. They got to keep it a secret, right? Because if it's your star defensive lineman like Sweat from UT, who's a big reason they are where they are right now. If he's in concussion protocol, like directly after the game, boy, you got to keep that a secret until the championship selections come out. It's absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Do I think Florida State would have won? Probably not, right? But I do think that Georgia belonged there too. I don't necessarily – I think that UT's strong right now. I think that Alabama's strong. But I don't know. If Georgia was in it, if Georgia was in this tournament, they'd win it. They would. They'd beat Alabama again. They'd make the adjustments. They'd beat them. Not again, but they'd beat Alabama, and they'd beat the rest of those teams in there too. But, I don't know. The immediate solve is the 12 teams, right, Roger? That's the immediate solve.
Yeah, dude, it's all BS. It's fixed. And there's a bunch of conspiracy theories out there, but you can't even call them conspiracies because they all make sense to me. So I think we all agree Michigan and Washington deserve to be there. Undefeated, power conference. And at the end of the day, the whole point of the power conference is like, hey, man, like Josh said, they did everything they were supposed to do. And they played a ranked team in the ACC championship and beat them. I don't care if it was second, string quarterback, third string quarterback. I don't care if it was the daggum punter that was the quarterback, because college football is a lot different than the NFL, where the NFL, they look at longevity. You expect your franchise quarterback to be there for 10 years, 15 years. With college, they know that, hey, man, you're probably going to get 2 good years out of your starting quarterback. Now, maybe you get a freak of nature. He comes in freshman year, stays 4 years. He's the starter and he rock and rolls. But generally speaking, with college football, you're going to get about 2 good years out of your quarterbacks, which means that second and third string, guess what? They're on scholarship too. Now, obviously, the offense, wasn't what it typically was, because guess what? He didn't have the first team snaps. We've all seen it in sports. Okay, at the end of the day, you have to have some playing time. You have to have the reps in practice. It was clear he hadn't had all that, but they still won, right? Had that been an Alabama-Georgia game with that, man, this is the epitome of defense in college football, because Florida State was lights out defense-wise. But it pisses me off because, and I'm not even a Florida State fan. I'm a Carolina fan. We're going to like the Drano Bowl or whatever the hell it is. But, to sit there and win every single game and be in a Power 5 conference, then what's the point of playing? Because you're saying that, hey, if I'm from the ACC and I win every game and I win my ACC championship and go undefeated, there's still a good shot that I don't go to the playoffs. Michigan number 1, Washington number 2, Texas number 3, Alabama number 4. That's your top 4. Florida State just on the cusp, number 5. So they win and they drop. And then, they had to drop Georgia to 6, right? So you drop from 1 to 6, losing to number 4. But, they had to drop them to number 6. But, a lot of the conspiracy theories that are out there, well, one, this was pretty interesting. And this one actually makes sense. I want to look into more of this. So ESPN, ABC, who owns them? It's all Disney, right? Where is Florida State from? Obviously, Florida. Ron DeSantis, there's a lot of people in the political realm that are like, hey, man, they are doing him dirty because of what he did to Disney. The other thing you got to look at is I think the SEC is up for their renegotiations for TV rights or something like that. It's either this year or next year. So some big time money on there. So there was a big push, and this was made a stink 3-4 weeks ago. I think we even talked about it on an earlier episode, Luke, where what happens if everybody goes undefeated? What happens if this and that, playing out different scenarios? But if you don't have an SEC team in the championship game, then guess what? Your TV rights, the money is going to go down because of the viewership, right? So they can't tell me that didn't play a factor. And don't tell me that somebody up there at ESPN and Kirk Herbstreit, dude, screw that dude. They sat there and they talk about, he posted something on next the other day. He's like, all your opinions don't bother me, da da da. Okay, well, here's the deal. Fact is, since we're dealing with fact is Florida State's in a Power 5 conference. Fact is Florida State went undefeated. Fact is Florida State beat a number 14 ranked Louisville in the ACC championship to remain undefeated. It is your opinion that they're not going to do well in the college football playoffs. I mean, if he wants to play that game, we can go down that route and being undefeated. And I know, I think I'm probably more pissed off than Josh is at it, because I love college sports. I love college sports because up until the last couple of years, it seems that there was a purity involved in it. Now, I like the fundamentals of the game, but they've done exactly what Josh said. If you are a top tier player that may be on the cusp of, do I stay another year? Do I transfer? Do I go to the NFL? Well, if I just say, hey, man, I just went undefeated. We won our national championship. And their strength of schedule, I mean, they were top 15 strength of schedule. So you can't say, everybody plays cupcakes here and there. I get it. But, you're not talking about like they were Liberty or something like that. They won.
Not only did they beat a ranked team in the ACC championship, they beat them with their third string quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And Tate Rodemaker, the second string quarterback, which now he's QB1 after Jordan Travis got hurt, his concussion protocol would have been over in time for the playoffs. He would have been, they would have had he would have been back for the playoffs. He was not permanently injured. So the whole thing's BS. It's just the entire thing is BS, and it thoroughly pissed me off. And I wish FSU would boycott. I wish they would boycott the bowl game.
It's I'm a big believer in the markets, and they take a close look at the markets. And I don't care if Georgia won 2 national championships in a row, and they're just a juggernaut. Alabama is still a bigger market. It's a bigger market. people wearing Alabama gear all the way up in New York State. I feel like that Texas is one of the biggest markets in all of college football. Michigan is too. The outlier is Washington. Washington's not a huge brand. This is a good thing for them that they're going to build their brand, right? But Oregon would have been a bigger brand. They would have drawn more of a crowd, more eyes to the TV, right? And Florida State is right up there. Florida State, I guarantee, has a bigger market than Washington, way bigger. It's probably neck and neck. Oh yeah, I mean it's legendary market, right? Brett Favre knew that when he hooked up with that one Florida State girl that was plastered on. Remember that when they were?
Yeah.
What a creep. But yeah, I'm with Roger and Josh. It's disheartening. It's disgusting, and I'm not even a Florida State fan, and they were just done dirty. But real quick, gonna piss Ted and Jer off a little bit more here. I actually watched Monday Night Football because I had $1 on the game last night between Miami and Tennessee. I had $1 on Miami, of course. And man, I watched that game, and I'm telling you, it went back. I don't care anything about either one of those teams, but that quarterback for Tennessee, Will Levis, you ought to watch that guy play, man. He reminds me of Brett Favre. He's like tough. He's coming at these guys head on when he runs. He don't slide. And the quarterback coach is just like, don't do that. But he's just a tough dude, man. They scored 2 touchdowns, like 2 minutes to win the game by 1 point. It was actually a good NFL game. I couldn't believe it. But he's something else. So I don't want to drive Ted away because we do have some important stuff. And I really would like Teddy's view on what Josh is going to rant about quite a bit, which is the what is it? FISA 702 is up for. They're going to re-up that. So I'll kick it straight to Josh because I know he's been doing research on this today, on his company's dime probably. But Josh, so FISA 702, man, give us a 411 because we all three have a lot to say about this, and I think it should really concern everyone. But go ahead, Josh.
So anybody who's listened to a lot of our episodes knows about the FISA court, right? And so, what is it? So Section 702 specifically, it's a provision of the FISA Amendments Act of 2008 that permits the government to conduct targeted surveillance of foreign persons located outside the U.S., yada, yada, yada. And the government uses the information collected under, to protect the United States and secure the United States and make the United States safe, right? Because again, we've talked about it here before. People want to feel safe. And if I tell you, hey, if you just pass this law, you're going to be safe, a bunch of people will champion it, right? And they're going to name it that. They're going to say it's a great act, and it's this and it's that, and it's like, it's like the Patriot Act, right? You be a patriot. If you don't support this, you're not a patriot. So what does it do? So it authorizes the federal government to collect not only on non-U.S. persons, but it also allows the federal government to collect on U.S. persons who may be, affiliated with or in, or as my grandmother would say, in cahoots with, people of, nefarious character. So, some of the things, so it's up for reauthorization. So it's getting ready to expires, December 31st, at the stroke of midnight, it expires. So of course the government is, pitching this last minute, to, get it reauthorized. But what they're doing is is called the Section 702 Reform Act, because reform, right? Because reform sounds good. That sounds good. Hey, we're coming in, we're cleaning house, we're going to reform it. We're going to tighten up our shot group, so to speak, and, and clean this up. And we're going to go round and round and round on this thing. So I'll say a couple more things. I'll throw it to Roger. But why does the intelligence community need Section 702? So this is important for this first round. So it was originally, so the FISA court's been around a really long time. It was passed, the bill to establish it was passed in 1978. Okay, so it's been around for a hot ass minute, and it got re-energized, especially after 9/11. Like, they pumped that thing full of steroids and really expanded it, and it really grew legs under the Patriot Act. And a lot of it, and they couched it. They were like, well, all this change in technology, now people aren't just using email, they're using all these other things. Now, cell phones are obviously ubiquitous, text messages, messaging apps, whole nine yards. All right. And so, because of the change in communication, the government had to seek individual court orders. Okay. Based on, what do we call it? Probable cause. Because what do you need to investigate? You need probable cause. Okay. Well, the IC they came out and said, well, that's really costly to do that, to do individual court orders, especially because, and I quote from the own DNI, the Director of National Intelligence brief, and Roger's going to read some probably from this as well, from their own brief on the DNI.gov website. They need this because, quote, the government couldn't always meet the probable cause standard. I'll say that again in case, some of you guys are still hung up on, listening to, to the football piece that you didn't want to hear. They need Section 702 because, quote, the government couldn't always meet the probable cause standard. Now swirl that around in your nugget and think about what that means. If the government can't meet the probable cause standard, why is it investigating? Why is that authorized? Who's authorizing that? Section 702 is authorizing that. It's authorizing warrantless searches and investigations. So this is just the tip of the iceberg on this, man. I've got so much more to say, but I want to let Roger jump in here and give some, the first round of his piece.
Yeah, you hit on the head, and I want to expound on what you just read because there's even more important parts to that piece, though. So it talks about, and this is from their PDF, okay, explaining 702, and we'll have to put the link out. We haven't put anything out lately, but we'll have to put the link out because just like I pulled it up this morning, just gurgling it real quick, and found their PDF, and you kind of read through it, and you're like, okay, this kind of makes sense. No, actually, this right here, a couple sentences there, but as you get into, I think it's 4 or 5 slides. As you get into the slides, it's like, well, slide 1 and 2 are not congruent with slide 5 very easily. So the rest of that, so it goes into Congress enacted 702 to address a collection gap that resulted from the evolution of technology. By the mid-2000s, many terrorists and other foreign adversaries were using email accounts serviced by U.S. companies. Because this changed communication technology, the government had to seek individual court orders based on a finding of probable cause to obtain the communications of non-U.S. persons located abroad. Now, here's the rest of this. This proved costly because of the resources required and because the government couldn't always meet the probable cause standard, which was designed to protect U.S. persons and persons in the United States. Like, they are literally telling you, you got some constitutional rights. We can't necessarily, we don't have the money and we don't have the resources to make sure that those rights are protected. So we're just going to have this cut out, this workaround to where we're just going to do it anyway. And what's crazy is as you continue going into this thing and you delve into it, it's a play on words. It's the difference between targeting and what they call a query. They sit up there and they say, who can the IC target under Section 702? Non-U.S. persons located abroad who are expected to possess, receive, or communicate foreign intelligence information. Who can't the IC target under 702? U.S. persons, regardless of location, any person located in the U.S., and then, blase, folks that are basically U.S. bound. But then you go all the way down to the end, after they give you, a bunch of vignettes on, well, this is the results, right? The ends justifies the means. Look at all the great things we've done with it. Then it goes down and says, and I'll have to look it up, but it talks about U.S. person queries. What are U.S. person queries? Now, this is like slide 4 or 5. A query is a means to identify previously acquired data in U.S. government systems. Query terms can include, among other things, names, email addresses, and phone numbers. IC can only query Section 702 information if the query is reasonably designed to return foreign intelligence. Reasonably designed, okay? to return foreign intelligence information, or in the case of FBI, evidence of a crime. So, I mean, you could sit there and argue, reasonably designed to return versus actual probable cause. To me, those are two, because if you had probable cause, you would state it. Hey, there is probable cause that Josh committed a crime, so we're going to, take these actions. And then, of course, then they throw in there the last bullet. As part of Section 702's extensive oversight, DOJ and ODNI audit the agency's U.S. purchasing queries of content to ensure the queries satisfy the legal standard. Dude, it's you have due process. You have, under the 14th Amendment, obviously you can't have warrantless searches and seizures and this and that. I think it was Amendment number 4. This is just a way, because they use query versus target. Guess what? In my mind, the way I read this and the way I've seen this play out, and I know a lot of our listeners out there that may or may not have worked with us or around us in the past may strenuously object. Dude, it's the same. You're collecting on me. You have the ability to collect on me without a warrant and without going to court.
Looks
it's
like
a
Josh
query.
wants to say something.
And they're getting around it, right? It's semantics, because it's a query. It's a query against already collected information.
Yes.
Okay. So, well, we'll get into that later.
Hold on. Let me finish on the query real quick, and I'll kick it to you. So then, because they already know these things are coming up. So then they put the next, header. Couldn't the IC get a FISA order or a warrant to run these queries? A warrant requirement would hamper the speed and the efficiency of operations and impair the IC's ability to identify and prevent threats to America. Just telling you they're circumventing it.
Before I go into 2000, well, let's see. Before I go into Luke circa 2002, early 2002 mode, because you're allowed to change your mind in this world. You're allowed to change your mind, but I'm gonna ask Josh something based on how I used to think in 2002, 21 years ago. But first, before I want to read something here about the evidence of a crime query. Okay. Listen to this. So this bill tightens the restrictions of the FBI's querying of incidental collected U.S. person data. The bill revokes the FBI's ability to conduct evidence of a crime queries outside of narrow expectations. That sounds pretty good, right? But now here's the Paul Harvey. Here's the rest of the story. This change will likely have a muted operational impact because the FBI has not relied on these queries to drive its investigations. In 2022, out of the FBI's roughly 204,000 U.S. person queries, only 16. That's not 16,000. That's not 1,600. That is 16. Only 16 were identified as solely having an evidence of a crime purpose, according to the intelligence community's annual statistical transparency report. Okay, 60. Oh, well, this is good because now the FBI, we're taking away their ability to do evidence of a crime query. Well, they weren't doing that in the first place. So whatever. But Josh, I'm a patriot, dude. I love this country. I don't want to see another 9/11. I mean, according to ODNI, this looks like it's on the up and up. I mean, who can the IC target? Non-U.S. persons located abroad who are expected to possess, receive, or communicate foreign intelligence information to include terrorist information. Josh, they're trying to plan an attack. You know as well as I do, if they have the means to conduct an attack, they will. So what's the problem? I mean, who can't they target? Roger said it. You said it. U.S. persons, regardless of location. Any person located inside the United States. Now, look, I know what you guys said about queries and stuff like that, but don't you want to collect information on terrorists, Josh? I mean, hey, and even if my name does appear in some query, Josh, I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong. What do I have to hide? I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not breaking the law that I know of. So what's your problem with this thing, man? I mean, so what? It's a query. I'm not doing anything wrong. This is Luke 2002 speaking. This is Luke 2002 asking you this question. Because when the Patriot Act came out, I'll be honest with you, I was just like, I thought that way. It's like, I don't have anything to hide. We got to catch terrorists. We don't need another 9/11 here. We don't need a dirty bomb going off in the middle of Houston, Texas, or wherever. I mean, isn't it worth it, Josh? I mean,
love it.
so it's so hard to say these things. So, Josh, explain the why. We're all three pissed off about this. We're all three sounding the alarm bells. So, before we delve further into the last slide on this thing, which Josh had a highlighter out in the last slide of the DNI thing, before we dive into that, I think it's important that the audience understand, right, my mom listened to this, why we're so worked up about this. Because all we're doing, Josh, is going after terrorists, right?
Oh, my sweet summer child. That's what I would go back and tell 2002 Luke, my sweet summer child. It sounds great, right? I mean, it does sound good. And full disclosure, I was much like you in 2002. 9/11 happened. I was like, we're going to get some terrorists and we ain't going to let that happen again. But like you said, with new information and, a few years of hindsight, I'm allowed to change my mind. So what I would have told, 2002 Luke now is, well, so let's hop in our Wayback Machine and go back to the Alien and Sedition Act. All right, let's take a look at what our government has done historically, in the name of quote unquote good. And I would direct 2002 Luke to the church committee and the church committee hearings. All the way up to the Patriot Act, all the way up to the U.S. government droning a U.S. citizen, and his son. The government is not to be trusted, period. And, a lot of people, were like, oh my gosh, the U.S. government is beyond reproach and they have our best interests in mind. No, they don't, because the government is run by people and human beings. Shockingly enough, people out there listening who may not know this, they're fallible. And, when you start taking a look at the Section 702, and this is just what's current. I want to caveat this before we, continue to get into this. This is what's current. The reform and what's in that bill is even worse. It expands the powers, even though that, they're saying the FBI, we're going to constrain them. No, we're not. It actually expands the powers. And so, we talked about in this little brief they have on slide 5, they have, the oversight. The oversight is the Department of Justice, and I quote, DOJ reviews every targeting determination to ensure it is consistent with the statute and targeting procedures. Okay, that sounds good. The DOJ is on our side, right? The DOJ's got, they're manning the store and making sure that there's no abuse of power. So if you go to 2016 and, on slide 9, it says that in 2016, quote, the DOJ conducted approximately 55 Section 702 oversight reviews. Okay, well, that sounds good. Again, somebody's minding the store, but that wasn't every single one, which on slide 5, they say they review every one. And then on slide 9, they said they only conducted 55 section reviews, because on another slide in 2016, they had 16,000 plus queries. So they only did 55 reviews on those over, 15,000 queries. So you're contradicting yourself, on the very next slide, because you're not reviewing every single one if you only did 55 reviews. Now I'm a product of Florida Public Schools, but I don't think 55 equals 16,000 and change. And, and again, so this is just what we have now. And you go on to, slide 10, and we start talking about, the least intrusive means. Now, we all are very familiar with the least intrusive means and what that is. Okay. And so, the least intrusive means, for those who may not be as spun up about it, when you're investigating someone, you are generally directed and you are inclined, regulatory guidance says you will use the least intrusive means as possible. Okay. Which means I'm not going to go, try and surreptitiously enter your house to collect information or do anything if I can just get it if it's publicly available. Okay. Now, when we talk about, least intrusive on here, they say, quote, querying information the IC already possesses, which is less intrusive than other investigative techniques. Why does the IC already possess information on U.S. persons? Okay. As much as I dislike him, Edward Snowden exposed a bunch of this. All right. He's not a hero, but he exposed a bunch of this. The NSA, and we talk about, the government being beyond reproach. The NSA has been chastised a number of times for collecting, information on U.S. persons. In March 2017, the FBI, against the FBI's own Office of General Counsel, conducted queries using 70,000 identifiers, quote, associated with people who had access to FBI facilities and systems. On a single day in December 2017, the FBI conducted 6,800 U.S. person queries using Social Security numbers. And then between December 7 to 11, 2017, FBI official improperly reviewed raw FISA information using 1,600 U.S. person queries. Everybody remember Roger Stone? Everybody remember the FISA court in 2016 that renewed the surveillance on him based on a DOJ lawyer. A DOJ lawyer, right? These are the ones that are supposed to be manning the store and protecting American citizens against, a tyrannical government and overreach. Remember, he falsified information he provided to the FISA court, omitted information, changed the wording around, words have meaning. But don't worry, because according to this little thing, the U.S. government is going to protect us. On slide 8. And it's even titled, the greatest thing is even titled, how do I know the government follows those rules? Quote, the government's use of Section 702 is subject to extensive and rigorous oversight by all branches of government. Period. All of these reviews have universally concluded that the government is properly using this authority to conduct foreign intelligence collection. They actually have the gall to say that the government investigated itself and the government says, no, we're good. We're not abusing anything. They literally had the gall to say this. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Now, I'll kick it over to Roger. He can talk because after this, I'm going to lay out what the new 702 Reform Act allows the United States government to do.
I'm going to go back and dive into the queries because that's how they're using this to work around, minus some new stuff that Josh is going to read. But again, straight from their stuff, the IC often runs U.S. person queries to identify and protect potential victims of terrorist or cyber attacks. And I love the way they use it's protect the victims. Okay? It's to protect you. That's why we're doing it, right? Love the verbiage on this stuff. And also as the first step in evaluating and detecting potential threats to the homeland. In these situations, the IC may not have probable cause to believe the U.S. person is a foreign power or agent of a foreign power. Here are a few examples. And then they list 3 or 4 things or whatever. They're telling you up front they're going to circumvent this stuff. And now they're going up for renewal. Okay. And this is from Electronic Frontier Foundation, pretty good, EFF.org. They're real big on this type of stuff and trying to protect our rights and this and that. But from them, as a reminder, 702 was designed to allow the government to warrantlessly surveil non-U.S. citizens abroad for foreign intelligence. But then they go into, and this is all through FOIA and their own investigative reporting and some stuff that we've seen in the AP and Reuters. FBI agents have been using the Section 702 databases to conduct millions of invasive searches for Americans' communications. So it goes back to Luke. Did you actually provide oversight on all those? Of course not, including those of, and there's links here, protesters, racial justice activists, 19,000 donors to a congressional campaign, journalists, and even members of Congress. I think we know, a few folks in the government that have been the subject of this, right? And all it takes is a, hey man, I think such and such is bad, or he's tied to the Russian, the Russians through his server in his own office or what have you. Even, further, and I'll kick it over to Luke and he can throw it back to Josh. But additionally, the bill authorized the use of this unaccountable and out of control mass surveillance program as a new way of vetting asylum seekers by sifting through their digital communications. The problem is it's mass surveillance. Okay, so none of this stuff is individually looked at. There's no oversight. What they do is they take snapshots, and not even good snapshots with the numbers that Luke threw out there. It's like, hey, you pull 10% or 25% or 30%, and you make sure everything's collected properly. So, hey, for the other 80 or 90, it's okay that we violated your rights. I'm not even a fan, and I know this wasn't his intent, but they list in here the least intrusive means. Okay, so we're only going to violate a little bit of your rights first. And then when we don't find anything, we're going to continue to violate your rights until, like Luke was, alluding to earlier, hey, man, you did something illegal. I mean, we see it all the time. Hey, nobody here is clean or perfect. If the IRS wants to go through your stuff, they're going to find you guilty of something. Okay. If the U.S. government wants to go through your stuff, they're going to find you guilty of something, no matter how small it is. No matter how you're like, oh man, everybody does this. They're going to find you guilty of something because we've all done something illegal, whether we've known it or not. And what pisses me off about it is, and here's why this is all a big, for me personally anyway, if you start here and you allow this cutout for this piece here, violating the Fourth Amendment, violating the 14th Amendment in my eyes, where does it stop? It doesn't stop. You keep using the ends justifies the means. And, and going back to Luke's vignette earlier, taking back to 2002, my opinion on this has changed a lot. One, because my focus has and my perspective and experience. When this, the Patriot Act and all this stuff first rolled out, I mean, I think we were good stewards of the government's delegation of authority and power. As investigators, we didn't abuse it. Josh probably did a couple of times, but personally, didn't abuse it. There's plenty of oversight. There's a lot of oversight. I mean, dude, it was tough to do anything on that side of the house. It was very tough because of the levels of not just bureaucracy, but legitimate oversight that it had to go through. But like they say, man, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's like, I didn't abuse it. So, going back to the 2002, hey, I didn't abuse it. And I know we're doing this the right way, same way as my unit and our counterparts. Hey, the rest of the federal government isn't and doesn't. And I'm not saying that you sit there and you take power away from the FBI or the other IC organizations out there. What I'm saying is there's ways to afford due process. Go get the probable cause. Hey, you know what? I get it. It's kind of like Rudy Giuliani did with up in New York. When he first went up there and he cleaned up the crime, and I think we mentioned this in an early episode, but one of his major factors in reducing crime in New York was, well, one, he identified the problem. He said, the problem is there's so many criminals and so many crimes that we just can't arrest them and take them to court. We can't try them because there's just too many. It takes too long. The system's bogged down. So you know what he did? He took old school buses, put them on every city block, and put a judge in there. Cop would sit there and arrest them, and you'd go to court, and you'd be in court within 24 hours, may have been the back of a school bus. But they are so into, I mean, believe me, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars and sending them to God knows where. It's like, hey, why don't you revamp your process as opposed to, hey, you know what? I just don't have the time and the resources to do this. So we'll just, we'll violate a little bit of your rights before we go further. I mean, that's what pisses me off. There is no attempt to look at the system and look at the process and say, how do we do this without violating the rights of Americans?
Yeah, the trick is, and I've been in the community. Well, I was in the community for a very long time. The trick is to find workarounds, and that's what they do. And I've seen it done. Workarounds to, Josh said, words mean things, or words have meaning. They look at the words and they find a workaround, and that's how they do it. And Josh touched on, it's a lot of stuff I'd like to say here, but let's start with this. There's an easy solution to this. I think the FBI is what's driving most of this, honestly. And we've said it on this podcast before. The FBI needs to focus strictly on criminal matters, zero intelligence. Zero, because that's the majority of the problem here. is what we're reading this DNI infographic thing. The FBI is running most of this. It's like, check it out, dude. 16 queries out of 204. That's 0.008% that had probable cause. But hey, I guess the good news for the FBI is now it will be 000. It will be 0% now because they removed that. You don't even have. They removed that that restriction, if you will, on the FBI. So now the FBI can just continue doing what they do. And I will posit that, and if this passes in 2024, that they'll double. There'll be 408,000 queries, and zero will have any. There will be no probable cause whatsoever. So Josh threw something in the chat. I want to cover it, not cover it, but give him credit for it. Albert Camus once said. Albert Camus, famous existentialist. I know Damon knows that. He reads Albert Camus every morning. The welfare of people has always been the alibi of tyrants. Okay, I mean, wouldn't it be great if there were no terrorist attacks? Wouldn't it be great if there was never another 9/11, another shoe bomber, all this stuff? Man, how much of a pain in the ass has the shoe bomber been over the years? Man, I still had to take off my shoes going through TSA, right? So if this bill is so good, by the way, if the FISA is working so well, why the hell am I still having to take off my shoes at the airport? If this is so great, then why do we even have a TSA? But that's besides the point. But Benjamin Franklin once said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. That's what we're doing here. In 2002, Luke, and a lot of people out there, Joe Sixpack is like, I don't see the problem with this. It's the slippery slope thing, man. We talk about slippery slope a lot, and Roger covered that. But look at January 6th. Okay. I think in the immediate aftermath, and while it was going on, January 6th, there were a lot of emotions running high. I personally thought, man, it's about damn time, because it was in the aftermath of the BLM stuff. I was like, it's about damn time that some of these representatives understand what it feels like to be afraid, right? We even did an entire podcast. We talked for an hour and a half about January 6th and what we really thought about it. We never released that one. That one went into the trash bin because we thought about stuff like this. When are you going to be labeled a threat to national security? Just because you have an opinion. When are you going to be part of one of these queries because you have an opinion? I've been learning a lot since I've been in the private sector. But one thing the private sector and the government have in common is numbers. You got to produce. If you want that flus, you got to produce. Remember flus in Afghanistan? Money.
Yep.
If you want that flus, you got to produce. And this is a great production mechanism for FBI agents in charge, for senior desk officers within the CIA. It's really great. And their brains will jump through hoops to justify things like this, to justify droning a U.S. citizen. I told you all about the CIA case officer who just he and I went round and round, almost got in a fight in the middle of his street because he's justifying it to me, saying that, oh, well, he was given due process. Oh, he was? How? Well, 20 lawyers sat in a room and decided, okay, he's got due process. Now he's got to die. I've worked with a lot of FBI, and I know there are great FBI agents out there. I know. But I've worked with my fair share of those who will say to your face, and they walk down the street, that they're patriots and they're protecting you. But they'll be the first one to violate your rights. Not because they're nefarious or anything like that, but because they've been so brainwashed over the years to think what I am doing, keeping people safe, trumps, like Roger said, keeping those safe trumps their civil liberties every day of the week, because they're probably a felon anyway. You're probably a felon anyway. We're going to take away your right to vote. We're going to take away your right to own firearms. So you're probably a felon anyway. So let's preemptively violate your civil rights. It's just, I think it was Josh. I don't know. One of you guys said it, that humans are fallible. And we saw it with Roger Stone. We saw it with James Comey. We saw it with Peter Strzok. And when I think of 702, I just think of Peter Strzok sitting in an office just signing paperwork. day in, day out for political purposes. You know, it's too easy to abuse. I like it. I'll let you say that, Josh. So that's a good one. I'm gonna kick it over to you. I mean, this is so frustrating. I feel like I'm talking into the wind here about slippery slope and all this stuff, but I mean, I consider myself a pretty good American, and then we all three went off to fight for our countries for 20 years or damn near 20 years, and now all of a sudden they're talking about veterans of PTSD maybe don't need to maybe they're going to lose their right to own a firearm, and it's like, when is this stuff going to swing back? When's this stuff going to swing back? It's already swung back to bite us. When's it going to swing back to bite you? I mean, I don't know. Josh, go ahead. I love that quote, man. I'm not even gonna take your thunder on that one.
Yeah, I'll throw it out there, and then people can ruminate on it, and they can go look it up and see who said it. But quote, I like to take the guns first and due process second. So I'll throw that out there, and you guys kind of ruminate on that for a little while. But when we talk about the reform, and you brought it up in the chat, Luke, and we hadn't mentioned it yet, is they are changing the definition of an electronic service communications provider, right? So an internet service provider. Before, in the old 702, it was basically companies that have direct access to communication. So phone companies, let's say like Google, right? So Google has Google phones, Google Voice, email, text messaging service providers, that are based in the US. The government could compel them to turn over, that information that's, transiting back and forth over their networks. Well, under Section 504, the House Intelligence Committee's bill, right, which 504 nests under this 702, Section 702, they are saying now that any entity that has, quote, access to equipment on which communications may be transmitted or stored is fair game. Okay, so think about that. An entity that has access to equipment on which communications may be transmitted or stored. Okay, now they can compel them, and it's going to be, like you said in the chat, they're going to be required to provide that information. And so when that tells me, if I'm required to provide something, that tells me, reading between the lines, that you don't have to have a warrant for that information. If I'm required to provide that to you, is that like, hey, you just, you drop by, does old Bob drop by at the end of the month, and, we load it up on his thumb drive for him, so he can take it back to, 26 Federal Plaza in Manhattan and, start doing the queries? I don't know. But so when we talk about people, who have equipment that, is transmitted, stored, who are we talking about? I mean, you're talking hotels, libraries, coffee shops. I mean, they are not all going to be required to comply, not just the internet service providers or the telecommunications service providers. All right. Think about a repair person coming in your home to fix the Wi-Fi. All right. That person now has an obligation, potentially. And it's just, when you think about how broad this can be, and what can happen under this, it is absolutely disconcerting. And now when you go and you look at Section 704, when you look at what is the government, how is the government planning to use it? Guess what? They don't have that in there. You know what it says? That's classified. So how the government's planning to use this information is classified. They won't tell you, but they're going to tell you, oh, we're going to collect it and you can't stop it. Oh, how are we going to use it? It's classified. Sorry. Absolutely insane. It was so insane that the FISA court, one of the amices, posted a blog, came out today or yesterday, and actually made a blog post about this, warning Americans about this provision. That's how bad it is. The FISA court other than them when they came out and they rebuked the lawyer that falsified the information to get the warrant on Roger Stone, the FISA court has never done this. They have never come out to warn American citizens about a law which is about to be passed. That's how egregious this is. Guess what the Senate did today? And I'll kick it to Roger. The Senate attached Section 504, which nests under Section 702, to the National Defense Authorization Act today, which is going to a floor vote tomorrow, which will likely be voted on Tuesday. So, back to 2002, Luke, are you going to vote against the National Defense Authorization Act? Do you hate America? Do you not want us to be safe? Do you not want the Ukrainians to get the money they need to fight the communists? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. That's what your government did today. It's what your government did in support of you. So sleep well, people. Sleep well.
That takes us down a whole different road by itself with bills and stuff like things like that. They nest them within other things, right? You've heard like pork and barrel spending, and it's the same concept. You just take other things that may not be so popular or maybe benefit just a few, and you throw it into a bigger, broader bill. This is good for everybody. And then, like Josh said, what, you don't want to protect the United States of America? Why do you want to defund soldiers? Why do you want to stop their paychecks when they're overseas and this and that, and, pulling on your heartstrings? And it should be individually voted on. Never happened. But it's very important because what Josh was talking about was really, and they've been rebuked about this several times. I mean, just go back and Google it. I mean, they've had several cases, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, where they come out like, yeah, you've actually FBI, you violated NSA, you violated tens of thousands, or the rights of tens of thousands of Americans, and they start to get into this. Well, one, Congress is a bunch of idiots. Okay, you've got who was it, Feinstein or whoever, or McCaskill that thought that magazines, the clips, you just use them and you throw them away. So we have like 10,000. So these are the people that you have voting on this stuff, right? They have no idea. They barely know how to send an email, but you're talking about downstream versus upstream. And you can argue the merit of either one of those. But the important piece is, downstream is information, downstream from the server, between the individuals or whatever. And again, you can argue that merit. But once you get to upstream, and I remember saying this like 2 years ago, I don't know if I said it on the podcast or not, but I was like, yeah, man, start using, and I think I may have put it on our chat. I was like, start using your VPNs at home, because there was a court ruling that basically the FBI could go in and conduct surveillance on any U.S. person that was a victim, or just, there was some communication between us and a malicious actor. Okay. Now the way where they worded it was, Josh gets hacked. Okay. He gets hacked by some Iranian, hacker. So you know what? Hey man, we're protecting Josh. So we can go in through his router and take a look at his laptop, because we're after the Iranian. We're after the Iranian malicious actor, not Josh. We just need the data there. And I said it right then and there. I'm like, man, this is all bad. And what they're going to do, like Josh said, they're going to get to the point where they're just going to go to the service providers, even though there have been previous rulings saying, yeah, you can't actually do this. They're going to go to the service providers. And I think, Luke, you put on here, he said, write this down. We're entering an age of ubiquitous collection. And he's absolutely right. It is all going to be warrantless. They're going to grab what they want. There's going to be very, very, very minimal oversight. And if anything's violated, one, we'll never hear about it, right? You'll never hear about it. It'll go through some, secret court. Like if you see everything else, the secret court, it'll all be redacted. It's, oh yeah, hey Josh, we're sorry. So, it brings me down to the question. Well, let me roll this back. So the downstream versus upstream, here are the arguments they're using for that. The asylum seekers. So because you've got tens of thousands, if not more, Luke's probably got better numbers on it, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of asylum seekers. So we got to do background checks on these folks. So they just want to go in and take a look at all their electronic communication. And if you happen to be a recipient on one of those spam texts, spam email, right? We get 100 of them a day. I'm still waiting for my rich, Nigerian uncle to pay me the $30 million that he promised to send to me. Even that, if that comes from a foreign, IP, foreign address, what have you, that gives the FBI or the NSA or any other IC organization the air quotes right to go through all my stuff. So then it makes me wonder, and I'll throw this over to Luke. Do you think, how many of Americans do you think have already been targeted? There's 350 million Americans, 348 million Americans. But let's say the people in our group that we know, let's say the C3 listeners, all dozen of them. So out of the 12 C3 listeners that we have, how many of them do you believe have already been targeted?
Well, I'll put it to you this way.
Queried. Sorry, I don't want to get banned on
okay.
YouTube. Queried.
Well, I think based on what I know about the algorithms and how things work on the back end, if you haven't been queried yet, you're in the pike. You're in the pike to be queried, because it's just a matter of time before a certain set of circumstances all align to where now you're queried. And you're not going to be charged with anything or whatever, but you're going to be queried and put into this group over here, and they're going to. It's all algorithms and link diagrams and stuff like that. Now, most likely you haven't done anything, but the fact is, your information, you are in the IC at that point, and they're using your selector to go to different areas. It's very complicated. I get it. It's very complicated. The NSA really knows what they're doing, and it's scary. But I would say zero have been queried. But I do believe that our information is being used to get to other information, because it's all the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. That's what it is. It's like back when we were working in Afghanistan. Specifically Afghanistan, with a lot of Pakistanis, a lot of Iranians. The 6 degrees of separation, when bin Laden was still alive, we were within that. I knew somebody who knew somebody. I may not have known, but I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody else that was directly tied to Osama bin Laden. The 6 degrees are not, I think there was a movie about it, 6 degrees of separation with Will Smith, I believe. It's pretty scary. And that's what the problem I had downrange a lot was, when we'd get to that 3rd degree of separation, we start targeting somebody. I'm like, yeah, I'm not seeing it. I'm just not seeing it. But the nerd behind, the screen is just like, no, it's here. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just still not seeing it. It's just, it's a crazy thing. So, and we're tiptoeing along ice here when we talk about this kind of stuff. You guys know what I'm talking about. But when I said we're entering an age of ubiquitous collection, so let's talk about the fact that this bill compels companies to turn over information. Well, those terms of service you never read, where it's like, oh, you got to agree to the terms of service again. Well, here's the thing. There's types of information that may be collected about U.S. persons, right? Josh covered a couple of them. The first one is information obtained with consent. Okay. When you read through those terms of service, you might be surprised at what you see. There's probably a provision in there, especially when this one passes, and I guarantee it's in there now. It's like, hey, you're subject to a warrantless search of your shit. You've already consented to it. Everyone who is a Facebook user, X, maybe not TikTok, but any corporation that's incorporated within the United States, you've probably already consented to your information being collected. And then let's just use the top 2. There are 13 types of information, all the way to narcotics, threats to safety, personal security, all this stuff. Publicly available information. What does that even mean? Like, there's a search engine called LexisNexis out there who just compiles everything. If you pay for it, you'd be surprised at what information I can find on anyone if I'm paying for LexisNexis. I would call that publicly available information. So when I say ubiquitous collection, I'm saying, well, the U.S. government, they're just following their rules, obtained with consent, publicly available information. Everyone lives online right now. Everyone lives on social media. I mean, most people have Apple Pay. Not most people. A lot of people have Apple Pay. A lot of people pay for things through Facebook. Your finances are on there. You've probably consented to this warrantless search of your shit anytime anybody wants. That's why I say ubiquitous collection. It's just like we've already met the first two. Information obtained with consent and publicly available information. They're already collected on us. So it goes back to not 2002, Luke. This goes back to the Gen Z mindset of, oh, well, they've got it all anyway. Why should I care? You know, it's just it's just a bit frustrating. That's all I'm going to say. It's just a bit frustrating. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely, man, it's definitely frustrating. And yeah, we're kind of tiptoeing around some things for sure. But it's like in the DoD for for Intel Collect, it's like you said, it's either consent or you got to get 15 Mother May I's, almost up, some being at the cabinet level, to collect on U.S. PERS, but the FBI is like, we can do it just to keep you safe. We don't even need a warrant. We don't need to.
Yeah, it's criminal. So, Josh, let me just go through this real quick because I had one more thing to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, all good.
The types of information I covered the first two. 3 is foreign intelligence, so it's like spies and shit. Counterintelligence, spies and shit again. Let's scroll up here. Potential sources of assistance to intelligence activities. Protection of intelligence sources and methods. This is when you can collect on U.S. persons. Physical security, that's kind of broad. Personnel security, kind of broad. Communication security, narcotics, threats to safety, overhead reconnaissance, and administrative purposes. Information that may be collected about a U.S. person that is necessary for administrative purposes. Okay, what the hell does that mean? So here's what's interesting, right? Is that there's a provision, I think that the infographic covers this as well, about POWs, right? So 2002, Luke, you got a POW. You can see how collecting on a U.S. person in that case without their consent is valuable to try to bring that person home, because there's a lot of intel. I mean, if you can collect directly on them, that's gold as far as bringing them home. But I go back to the Apple terms of service. When you sign up as a DoD member, you go ahead and give consent to do that. That's your choice, not after the fact. And it goes back to what Roger or Josh, gosh, you guys are just, we're all in the same wavelength, so I'm getting y'all confused tonight. It's just like, this is Roger that said it. Why are we trying to cut corners here? Let's do it the old-fashioned way, like according to the law, according to civil liberties. Let's stop cutting corners. You're cutting corners because it's the easy way to do it. And it's a tricky way to do it. But I don't know, Josh, I cut you off. I just want to go through those types of information.
No, all good. And you're absolutely right. Why do we need to cut corners? Why does the IC need not to have warrants to do this for speed and efficiency? I tell you what, how about this? I don't care if you fail to foil an attack because you couldn't violate my constitutional rights. I don't care. I would rather something blow up and buildings fall down than the federal government continue to violate my constitutional rights. Because if they violate mine, they're going to violate yours. And everybody, 2002, Luke, and like I said, 2002, Josh, it's like, oh, whatever, it's fine. Okay, well, yeah, it's fine until 20 lawyers get in a room and decide that, you know what, Josh and Luke they deserve to die. And next thing you know, we get droned like Al-Awlaki did. And people just kind of shrug it off. And, Luke's, and Luke brought this up before. It's a litmus test, right? For people. It's like, oh, okay, you're conservative. Let's see how conservative you are. Let's talk about Al-Awlaki and, let's see where you stand. And one of the main organizations that should be jumping up and down, screaming to the heavens about this is silent. The ACLU. The ACLU should be standing in front of, they should be standing in front of the Capitol protesting about it, and they are silent. One of the most egregious, sweeping surveillance programs since the Patriot Act. And silence out of the ACLU. They're worried about people getting misgendered. Absolutely crazy. If this goes through, which it probably will, because they're set to vote on it next Tuesday. I think it's going to a floor vote tomorrow, but they attached it to the National Defense Authorization Act. Again, nobody's gonna, vote to not pay Joe, and not protect the United States, especially given, what's going on in the world right now. This is going to pass, and it's going to be law. It's going to be law, and it's going to be sad, and the tree of liberty, man, it's dry. It is so dry right now. It is on the verge of dying. So the government, and Luke read the Albert Camus quote, and everything, but the government's like, we want to protect you, we want to keep you safe. The government protecting me, the government protecting you, is a lot like the uncle who paid your way through college, but molested you. It's what it is. That's what it's equivalent to. All right. That may hit close to home for some of you out there. I'm sorry if it does. So Roger.
Because you're asking for a police state. That's what it turns into. Everybody talks about AI taking over the world, right? And AI is going to take over the world because it's going to prevent you from doing anything that could possibly harm yourself. So you're just going to, there's been movies about it, like, even like The Matrix. You just be plugged in, man, and you just can't do anything, right? Because of the police state, we're here to protect you. And the criminal thing about it is it's going to happen right underneath our noses. Because like Josh said, it's most likely going to pass. It's going to happen right underneath our noses. And you might see a blip in the media here and there. You might see a little, they're going to push it down, right? They're going to push it down. It'll be page 4, page 5. They'll be, there was, some objections to this, but it passed anyway. And unless you read the 34 pages of terms of service and your privacy rights, which you won't have any at that time, you won't even know that it happens. And what's sad is half the population out there is going to, be like what Luke said. Well, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why do I care? Well, yeah, you did do something wrong somewhere along the line. And the fact that this data is going to be collected and maintained, right, and archived until they need it later. Hey, let me go see what I've got on Luke here, because we're looking at him for a couple things. He's running for, to be the next HOA president of his neighborhood, following in the footsteps of Josh. Let's go take a look and see what he's got in his past with his communications. And it's not just happening here. This is a global problem because, a lot of our users or a lot of our listeners out there are probably users of WhatsApp. And, it's funny because there haven't been any articles in the last couple months on it, but England basically passed a law very similar. And hey, man, we're trying to stop human trafficking and child porn and other criminal acts, and hackers and this and that. So we just need access to everything, to the point where they want WhatsApp to actually give up the encryption keys. Right. I don't want to get too far down the road here, but you basically have end-to-end encryption, and they want to be able to go. And what's not clear to me is, like, I don't know if there's a legal process they do this or they just do it or whatever the case is, but to say, hey, man, we want to take a look at this. So you're going to provide us the key. And WhatsApp, owned by Meta, at least in public, has come out so far and said, hey, look, we're not going to give you that. We'll just shut down the service in England.
Quick question. Could you imagine being in a room and trying to explain end-to-end encryption to, like, Dick Blumenthal and Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, and that's part of the problem, right? That's part of the problem when your average age is like 92 in Congress and you can't explain it to them. So then you have these kids that are their staffers in the background writing this stuff. And then you think Biden understands this stuff? Seriously, or even Trump for that matter. It's like, you think they understand any of that stuff? No. They're.
I'm sorry. I was just dogpiling on, and I know Josh hates talking about Trump, but Trump is 2002 Luke. That's how I view it.
Yeah, good call.
I don't hate Trump or anything, but I guarantee you get this from him. He's like, hell yeah, boom. Yeah, I agree.
I'm saving lives. I'm saving lives. I'm saving lives, right? And so it's not just happening here in the States, but, it's going to happen in England already. And then, God knows it. Well, half the countries out there, it's already happening anyway. Right. But it goes back to simple due process, probable cause. Hey, man, I tell you what, once you set up some more, not necessarily courts. I mean, good Lord, have judges that this is what they do. Right? Have judges, Anwar al-Awlaki, that's a prime example. When you look, and I know we've talked about him before, but that's a prime example. You try him in absentia, right? You should, and this is it's the same argument. I think Josh was saying it with the guns. It's the same argument. It's like, hey, if you want to do all this stuff, go to court, get the warrant, give me the opportunity to defend myself.
It's so important to me personally to the in absentia thing, that the links we would have to go to do that, the hoops we would have to jump through to put it out to Alaki. It's like, hey, I'm trying to think of a scenario wherein you warn this person, you tell them, look, we'll go to whatever links. If we'll do some kind of crazy, Zoom or MS Teams trial, whatever. We have to go through the motions. We have to.
Sure.
And it can't be a kangaroo court. It can't be. And in absentia, right. I'm not a huge fan, but that would have been a degree better than what actually happened, because it wasn't a trial at all. But he was a U.S. citizen. Let's get it straight. Let's get it straight right now, just so everyone, has misunderstood us. If you're not a U.S. person, you can go get effed. You can go F yourself. I don't care. You can be a Brit, Australian, Yemeni, Afghan, whatever. We're not talking about that. Yes, let's target them. I don't care. You have no rights. You have no rights. Zero. But if you're a U.S. person, man, even if you're Anwar al-Awlaki, who, you know what? By all intents and purposes, he deserved to die. 100%. But he wasn't given that due process, and that erodes my rights and your rights. When he's not given due process, even though he deserves to die, that's a bad thing. And then, people are like, oh, well, what are you, a terrorist sympathizer? Absolutely not. I think that guy's a piece of human garbage. But what they did was erode my rights when they did that. And I get kind of excited about this.
Well, yeah, because lawyers sat around the room. Lawyers sat around the room, 3 of them. It was like, can we legally do this? Yep, absolutely.
Well, we'll figure out a way we can do it. We'll figure out a way, and that's why that movie I was telling you guys about is so fascinating to me. It's called Conspiracy. It's about a bunch of most of them were lawyers. They got in a room and they solved the Jewish question. You know how they did it? They did it with words. They did it with words, and they made it quasi-legal by manipulating the meaning of certain words. And I think that movie's valuable, man. It's called Conspiracy. I think it's available on HBO. It's got some really great actors. It could be a Broadway play, but it just shows you how words can be manipulated and how, certain leadership and organizations can make things happen real quick. Roger walked away, and now I'm panicking. So Josh, real quick, I mean, we've belabored this. I like to touch on a couple of things that are in the news right now. But what I don't want to do is move on to that before you've had your final say on this 702 thing. So anything else to say?
No, I'm rounds complete on that, man.
No, wait, this is some BS. So Roger gets up from the podcast. He walks away, and I get a notification on my iWatch here that says Roger closed all 3 activity rooms.
Dude, whatever. That is nothing. I'm sitting next to Josh. We are sitting down. Okay. I don't know if it was like from the movement of the fork or whatever, but we're sitting down. It's like Josh just closed the ring and completed his workout. I look over at him. He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Seriously, dude? Like, really? Like you've been sitting next to me for the last 15 minutes. Come on."
Roger. I want to move on to something else, but not before I give you your last word on the 702 thing, because we've been on this one for a while, man, like 50 minutes.
Hey man, note to the users out there is a piece of advice: you better start using VPNs, and you better start checking the logs of those things. When I have 3 or 4 of them that I use, and it's you better go start reading their terms of service. And usually most of those things they break it down to like 5 or 10 bullets. Like, we do not collect information, because that's the workaround, right? With a lot of these VPNs and this is why the Tor network became so popular, but they break it down and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, the government can subpoena us for records and this and that, which they can do. And once this Section 702 gets revalidated, they'll be able to do that. But they just don't keep logs. And so I would recommend, hey, take a look at some of the VPNs out there. Stuff changes all the time. See what they're willing to give up about you, because it's the ones that I use, they don't keep logs. They're like, yeah, the government can subpoena me and we will give up everything we have. And oh, by the way, we don't keep anything. So, but even that, right? Even that is not a surefire end all be all.
Take your tech advice from Roger. He knows what he's talking about. I do. But yet I had my identity stolen 15 times last year. So take it. I'm joking. I didn't.
I'm selling it.
Yeah. So, okay. A couple of things. I'm looking at the news right here, breaking stories and all this stuff, but newsflash, everyone, I think we called this a while back, is that Ukraine is losing this war. Even with the billions of dollars we provided them, they're losing, and it's not looking good. But when I say it's not looking good on what Zelensky's aims are, is to take back all the territory that Russia already has and Crimea. Okay, it's looking really bad for them to be able to do that, which is not what should happen anyway. So I think that an off ramp is in the offing. I think we're on our way to that. But this Ukraine funding, this bill that's going through Congress right now, is tied to the border. And all credit to the Republicans, I guess. And I don't understand the Democrats thing on this. It's just like, hey, let's shore up the border. Let's give a $1 billion to do whatever they're doing down on the border, and we'll give money to Ukraine. And the Democrats are like, no, we don't want to shore up the border. It's like, why? Why do you not want to do that? But tonight, the headline is White House open to new border expulsion law, mandatory detention, increased deportations. So now it looks like at least the White House is signaling to the voters for the funding bill that we're on board with this possibly. So, Josh, I think we were pretty right on the Russian order of battle. Imagine that. Shocking. And what do you think about the White House kind of giving some signals that we're ready to talk about the border now? You think that has anything to do with the 2024 elections? And, why is the Ukraine funding so very important? Because I really don't think, I think we've seen through the past year or 2 years that Russia is really not capable of taking Germany, for instance, or Poland, not quickly. Even though our ammunition supplies, I read that Germany's ammunition supply, by the way, Denmark has 0 artillery pieces, 0. And the artillery pieces that Germany has, they have enough ammunition for 2 days of sustained combat. 2 days! Let me tell you, Herr Hitler is rolling over in his grave right now. Let me tell you that. Because Germans used to be the king of the battle with artillery. They rivaled the Russians. But anyway, what do you think about all that, Josh?
I don't care.
You don't care? You don't care about the border?
No. So the border is absolutely 100% because, we're getting ready to kick off campaign season. That is the absolute only reason. And the fact that the equivalent of a U.S. Army division crossed the border in the last 72 hours. All right. So that's why they care about the border, because they know it's a real issue and because it's campaign season. As far as Ukraine goes, why Biden pledged today $200 million more dollars, to Ukraine, most of it in arms, and then some cash. So, I mean, the cash piece is easy. it gets laundered back into the DNC coffers, through organizations in Ukraine that donate, that make, political contributions. We saw that with Sam Bankman-Fried. That's why that guy went away quick. You didn't hear a whole lot about that. And the rest of it, it's whatever. No, I agree. It is about labor, right? They have to figure out a way to sustain Social Security, because Social Security it will not last in its form. We will not see Social Security in its current form. Our listeners won't see Social Security in its current form, mainly because it's a big Ponzi scheme. All right. So the U.S. government puts people in jail for running Ponzi schemes, yet they run the biggest Ponzi scheme of all, and it's called Social Security. I started reading a great book. It's called the Winter War, and let me grab it real quick. So I got it for $1 at the thrift store here where I live, and it's about Hoover Roosevelt and how they clashed over the New Deal. And they were, lame ducks. One was coming in, the other one was going out, but they clashed over the New Deal and how it was supposed to work, and how it was supposed to go. And a lot of people don't understand that the New Deal, the impact that the New Deal had on the United States, and really getting those socialist type programs started, and then, LBJ layered on the Civil Rights Act and the welfare programs on top of that, and that was the beginning of the end, for some folks in certain races. It's a lot to go. But the Winter War, if you haven't read it, it's Eric Rockway. It's fantastic. It's a quick read. It's not a really big book, but it gets into a lot of the inside baseball on the New Deal, and a lot of folks saw it for what it was at the time and tried to stop it. They just weren't powerful enough. So yeah, as far as Ukraine goes, we were right. Once again, the Russians, the whole, when we said, people were saying, well, if we don't stop Russia and Ukraine, they're going to take Europe. Like, really? The same Russians who can't beat a third-rate army in Ukraine, they're going to take Europe. They're going to take Poland. Give say what you want about the Poles, but give them their due when it comes to scrapping. The Poles would slaughter the Russians. They would absolutely slaughter the Russian military. And same with the Germans. As long as they got it done in 48 hours, since they're going to run out of artillery shells. That's crazy. That is absolutely insane that they're that short on artillery. That is absolutely crazy. And Denmark has none. Holy cow. One thing I will say, and this hadn't been in the news a whole lot, but folks need to pay attention to what's going on the Finnish border, the Russian-Finnish border. Russia is looking to try and potentially create a refugee problem up there, and this is reminiscent of Crimea in 2014. Going down there and little green men and getting people, amped up politically and some movements. So they're trying to do that. And, if you remember, who's the newest member, why? Who's the newest member of NATO? Finland. So keep an eye on that, folks. So, yeah, but other than that, man, dude, Russia can have the Donbas, they can have Crimea, the majority of the people there. And, Lucas said this, a number of times, the majority of the people in the Donbas and Crimea, they view themselves as Russian to begin with. They don't view themselves as Ukrainian. And, we said that before, and we got called Putin lovers and all of that. And then, turn around and look what's happened. A lot of the people in Donbas and Crimea are good with the status quo, because if they weren't, what would you see right now, Roger? If they were not good with the Russians being there, what would we be seeing in the Donbas and Crimea right now?
Oh, heck yeah, man. They'd be fighting, right? Not on the side that they're fighting on now.
There'd be an insurgency.
And before our, some of the folks out there get, their panties on a knot or underwear on a knot or whatever, you got to remember there were Minsk agreements, 2 of them that Ukraine agreed to as well, Ukraine and Russia, to basically make those regions autonomous. Okay. It was, now they're getting into it. And then now everybody, including Russia and Ukraine, wow, that's not what we really meant with this and that. And it's like, well, hey, if you're autonomous and you have your own government, then you kind of choose how you govern yourselves and your people. So, not that we're not Putin lovers, we're not Russian lovers and this and that. Point being is there are some Minsk agreements in there and people need to go back and read that stuff. And then what it brings to light, or the question is like, what are we really fighting over? What are we really supporting? Okay. Not just talking about the accountability of money and this and that, but they had agreements. That was the premise of it. And there was like 13 or 14 other points or whatever. But now you get one side. And I guess, you can read into it. There were violations by both sides and this and that or whatever, but there were previous agreements, 2 of them, that made those regions autonomous. Okay. When it comes to the border, it's simple. One, like you said, the election season's coming up, but there's a lot of backlash from within the Democrat Party. Katie Hobbs, our worthless governor out here in Arizona, just said that, hey, for all the stuff that we're doing down here to protect the border, which is nothing, we're going to send a bill to the federal government because they should be doing this. They should be paying for this. They should be sending resources down here. And you've already heard Adam say, hey, I think he stopped short of saying we're no longer a sanctuary city, but he was basically like, no help is coming. And you're starting to see more and more Democratic-led cities, these sanctuary cities and states, do the same thing because they're just being flooded and overrun. And even the time that we're recording this episode, you've got 10,000 more people coming across. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. For those that aren't tracking, like Lukeville, and here's where the problem may get so bad that you force the Mexican government to kind of step up a little bit because, so Lukeville, Arizona, you cross down when you go down to Rocky Point, pretty big tourist attraction out here in this area, especially during this time of year. They just closed that entry point. They just closed it. And now you have the Rocky Point folks down there and the government down there saying, hey, we won't survive. It's basically COVID 2.0 because they rely on tourism. They rely on all the Americans and the Canadians that come across the border down there and go stay down there for the wintertime. But what you're seeing is a lot of backlash from Democrats themselves because they're hearing it from their constituents back. Dude, New York City has gone to hell in a handbasket. I mean, it's bad. It's bad. And, I sit there and I'm not from there. I don't live there, but just hearing the pundits talk and news folks, left and right side, I mean, it's unbearable, And so what I expect to see is, as the election begins to get closer and you get the caucuses and the primaries, that, I think you're going to see a pretty big ramp up on the GOP side, because this is one thing where I think now, at the beginning, everybody was cool with it on the left, right? Oh yeah, we're good. We're good. Well, when you have illegals that are coming in running rampant on your city, crime rate goes up. You're putting veterans out of, they're homeless. You have no money, no resources for them. You don't have money and resources to dedicate to your own folks. And oh, by the way, if the federal government's not going to pay for it, that means the city's got to pay for it. You know what that means? Taxes go up. And then to have Eric Adams, come out and say, hey, help is not coming. What do you do if you're a New York City resident? You just throw your hands up like, man, you're just screwed. So I think you'll see a ramp up. Well, let me rephrase this. You should, they won't, because the GOP is horrible about this, but there should be a concerted effort, especially as the elections come closer, to, hey, we've got to do something to secure the border. It's obviously not going to fix itself, and it's getting worse and worse. But the problem is, I don't know what you guys see out where you're at. I mean, Luke, you probably see a lot, being in Texas, but with Josh out in North Carolina, I mean, you're already starting to see a lot of the national news coverage just falls off. It's not even there anymore. With
the border?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, other than Fox, but this is a not like I said, Josh mentioned it. This is all a labor thing. And it's like, I'm not going to say they're completely wrong. They're just, again, it goes back to the 702 thing. They're just not doing it the right way. And as we've said on this podcast many, many times, it's like, just level with us. Just level with us. Millennials and Gen Z aren't going to have kids. They don't want to have kids. Our birth rate is plummeting. We've got a labor problem. So it's like everyone's just like this silent nod, this secret handshake in DC among, all these departments. We need unskilled labor or moderately skilled labor, whatever, because Social Security, everybody knows it's in trouble, but it's in real trouble now, man. It's in real trouble. So we need labor. And this is what we're doing. This is what it's all about. I think we're overcompensating with it. 1.6 million people in a year at minimum. That's a lot. How are you going to do this when, you're running this program like it's being run? There's no right answer to it. I just wish they'd level with us and say, hey, here's the problem. Here's the overhauls we're gonna do to make it right. It is what it is, man. It's a tough situation. I understand. Well, I'm not going to rehash what I just said. So it's almost Christmas time, and there's a lot of good stories out there. And I'm going to give Josh a grab bag here. Well, maybe not a grab bag, but so it's funny that today, we go back to Israel. We were talking. We did a little history lesson. Not as good as Martyr made, of course, but Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. They had Palestine for a long time because, so they want to, flex. They want to bring back, Erdogan wants to bring back the good old days of the Ottoman Empire, where they ran the show. Nobody's buying it except for, Turkish voters. But Turkish lawmaker, I don't think it was the UN. I think it was in Turkey. He just went on this tirade against Israel today. And his last words of his tirade were, Israel will suffer the wrath of Allah. He stopped his speech and promptly had a no-shit heart attack. Dude had a heart attack on a Turkish parliament floor. I wow. You know what, bro? Hey, maybe not mess with God's chosen people from the Old Testament. You know what I'm saying? I mean, God is still God, because God was pretty brutal back in the Old Testament. You people never went to Sunday school. God was no joke back in the day.
Yeah.
Then his son came around and he lightened up a little bit, but God is still the same God. So we talked about Argentina. I think it's Javier Milei.
Yeah,
the new president. The new
the guy's
president. I read his first day in office. It reminded me of Trump. He had a little foible the other day when Sean Hannity asked him, everybody's saying you're going to be a dictator. If you get reelected, are you going to be a dictator? And Trump joked, he goes, I'm not going to be a dictator, but on the first day I will be. And he was talking about, the Obama, I got a pen, I got a phone. It was a joke, and the media jumped on that. But Milei, man, in his first week or 2 weeks, however long he's been in, I pulled the Meg Ryan from When Harry Met Sally. When I read the headline, he cut 9 of 21 departments. He just completely cut 9 of 21 departments. It's like, Meg Ryan, When Harry Met Sally, that was my reaction. But I want y'all to watch this real close. Today, he devalued, like the Argentinian peso need to be devalued anymore. He devalued it by 54% today. Now, I guess the president of Argentina has that authority, but you know what that means? I think it means he wants to make the dollar the national currency of Argentina. And I don't care if Biden's in office or Trump or George W. Bush or Barack Obama. That is a good sign for the dollar, that there are countries out there, and Argentina can be a major power. They can be a Brazil. They've got all the tools for it. Educated public, educated populace, big population. I mean, hey, they're going to the dollar. That's good news. So this guy's making noise. I like him. I like him a lot. But if I was his security detail, my radar would be up big time because he is a South American president.
Yeah. I saw that when I saw that he devalued the peso by 54%. I was like, holy cow. Like, that's massive, because that's also a gamble. That's a huge gamble. Right. And I mean, granted, the Argentine economy wasn't doing that great. The peso was already, not worth a whole heck of a lot. But yeah, it's a gamble. And you know what though? He came out and he said the right things. He was like, "Look, for the next few months, it's really gonna suck, but we've got to get through this, to start to climb back out of poverty, for lack of a better term." But Luke's right. Argentina could be. They absolutely can be a power. They have they have the populace for it. They actually have a pretty. They produce some pretty good tech folks. Within the IT world, they've got some great schools down there. I know some companies that have some offshoring down in South America. And in addition to Colombia, Argentina is where they have them. Because they do produce some solid folks. And again, it's one of those, you pay a brand new SOC analyst $40,000 40,000 USD in Argentina. Hey man, that same person, you're going to have to double that salary here in the United States, but I can pay them half that in Argentina, and they're going to live like Pablo Escobar. On $40,000 a year in Argentina, man. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, they're gonna be able to raise their own army, damn near with that down there. So yeah, no, I think there's a lot of potential, and a lot of upside to Argentina. If Javier Milei, does it the right way, and cutting 9 departments coming in, God, man, I'm sorry, but and I apologize for any people who are listening who have sensitive ears. I can only get so erect. I mean, how amazing would it be to have a U.S. president come in first day in office and just cut 9 agencies right off the bat? Like, oh my God, that would be the best. That would be the best. I would not want anything else for Christmas for the rest of my life if I could get that. I'd be like, I'm good. Just come in and with his he's swinging that chainsaw again, right? But again, he campaigned on it. He's like, "This is what I'm doing," and he's doing it. I love it. Love to see it.
Well, they don't have a choice, right? They had 143% annual inflation. 143. Okay, I can't even fathom that, right? But and then they talk about yawning fiscal debt, trade deficit of 43 billion, $45 billion debt to the IMF, with 10.6 billion due to the multilateral and private creditors by April. So going back to Luke's, because I agree with you, I think dollarization is what they want to do. And basically what they do is they give up their currency, right? They say, hey, we can't control this, so we're just going to use the dollar. And the reason why a country does that is because then it prevents you from printing your own money, which is one of the main factors. There's other things to it, but it's one of the main factors to inflation is the fact that, hey, man, you just keep on printing, right? Like kind of like we do, right? But anyway, neither here nor there. So they want to, well, my opinion is he wants to give up the Argentinian peso, go to the US dollar. That'll be one of the main drivers to inflation that he gets rid of. But I'll throw this out at Luke. I mean, how long? I mean, they got to do this quick, right? Like I can't imagine this thing goes 6, 7, 8 months. I mean, this has got to be dude. I mean, you look at it slashing it by 54%. So you've already got 143% inflation. I mean, what's another 54% to add on top of that? Because that's what happens immediately with devaluing your currency. But what, 60 days, 60, 90 days, you have to go to the dollar.
I don't see any other way. I think that's what he's doing. I really do. I think he's dropping a grenade in the room and is going to see what happens. I'm not an economist, obviously, not a doctor either, but I got a lot of stuff. I got a lot of stuff on COVID, right? But yeah, I don't see any other way. Devaluing it by half, over half. What is that? He's forcing everyone into a corner, and I think everybody knew this was the way he was going to go anyway. So here's the thing. Okay, so when you said something that queued me up. I was listening to Joe Rogan. Surprise, surprise. Luke listening to Joe Rogan. And Dave Smith was on there, the libertarian Dave Smith. And this guy is really turning me off lately. But where I do agree with him is the whole Fed printing money thing. And when you said, because he made a really good point. It's like inflation. He said back in the baby boomer days, right? And even before the baby boomer days, Gen X, or not Gen X, God, the greatest generation and before, The conversation around the dinner table around 1930 in 1935 was, wow, this used to cost so much more. These, this lettuce or these bananas or these widgets used to cost so much more. It costs so much less now, because that's back when we were still on the gold standard, where automation, uh, assembly line stuff would make it cheaper to produce products. And it stayed more in line with the laws of supply and demand. So things actually got cheaper, not more expensive. But then, I was like, "Oh, damn, that's a good point." Now with the printing of money, inflation is just now a fact of life. It didn't used to be like that, because we got off of a standard of currency and we went to, well, we just print money when we want to. And yeah. So anyway, that triggered me. That triggered a thought in my head. But man, dude, these libertarians out there, it's like Roger said, they're so naive. I mean, the stuff Dave Smith says is on the surface, it sounds good about foreign policy on the surface. But when you start to dig into what he's saying, it's like, dude, you can't be this naive. I mean, the three of us aren't globalists or anything, but can't you see how our involvement, like our Navy alone, secures shipping lanes, which makes the economy go, Speaking of which, Josh, dude, those Houthi rebels, bro, they're launching cruise missiles. They're doing half raids on moving ships in that shipping lane. What do you think is, I mean, I threw a lot at you right there. That was stream of consciousness. That was Luke's stream of consciousness. But you can address any of those points. But you've shared some stuff with us about the Houthi rebels launching cruise missiles that are hitting, transports there, and they're doing half raids on moving cargo vessels. Where do you think this goes? These aren't Taliban. These aren't Taliban running around.
No, these are not your average, jihadists who barely know their shapes and colors. These dudes are legit, right? And when I saw them do the half assault onto a moving ship and seize it, my first thought was when I saw the first videos of ISIS streaking across northern Syria, seizing and holding ground. When we saw them go into northern Iraq and seize and hold ground, was like, these dudes are going to have to be dealt with. Like, they're going to have to be dealt with. And this is not going to be a Bill Clinton. We launched some, cruise missiles at some tents in Yemen. We are going to have to put boots on the ground in Yemen to deal with them, because they're not going away, and they are well supplied, they're well funded, and they're well trained. And we are going to have to deal with this. And we're going to have to deal with this very, very soon, because, there's a news article just out today I was reading. They hit another ship, out in the Red Sea, and there was a gray hull, one of our Navy ships, I forget the name of it, had to go pursue, this ship and to provide assistance. So it's only a matter of time before one of our gray hulls gets hit, or, some U.S. merchant marine ship gets hit. And once they start hitting oil tankers, and the price of gas, hits back up. Hey man, it's election season, and we cannot have that. The administration won't allow it. Not during election season. So we're gonna be in Yemen on the ground very, very soon.
Gas prices are pretty good right now, Roger. I mean, I'm just saying. I think Joe Biden's doing a really good job, because gas is the lowest I've seen in a while, bro.
You know what? What's funny is I haven't heard the term Bidenomics, I don't think, like in the last 2 weeks. Because remember, that was a term that the GOP came up with. And then you had a couple key indicators that were like, they weren't good. It just wasn't as bad as it's been. Just like inflation. We talked about this last episode. They're like, the inflation rate came out today, right? It was like 3.1%. It's down. No, it's not. The inflation rate is down, but inflation is not down. But again, that they throw that verbiage out there so that people think, oh yeah, well, prices are getting cheaper. No, they're not. And finally, I think for the last week or so, maybe the last 2 weeks, you don't hear Bidenomics anymore, because at the end of the day, man, when this all started and we all called this stuff, it's like, hey, economy's going to tank, yada, yada, yada. But people hadn't felt it yet. People hadn't felt it. Now you've had a solid 2+ years where you're like, wow, my paycheck got cut in half. Not because I lost my job, not because the dollar lost value or yada, yada, yada. Like the price of goods, the price of everything is so much higher. And the problem is you're so high for so long. And, this is one of those things. It's like, they say people vote with their wallets. Well, no, they don't always. It just makes me wonder going into the next round. And we won't dive into this on this episode, but are people truly going to vote with their wallets this time? Because I tell you what, man, I'm tired of paying, out here in Phoenix, we always pay a little bit higher for gas anyway. Haven't quite figured out why, but I'm tired of paying $4.50, $5 a gallon for a gallon of diesel. I mean, it's horrible. I think it's finally coming down in some areas because you're coming off the summer blend. It's wintertime. There's typically less driving, this and that, but it's definitely not what I was paying 3 years ago. So it's kind of interesting. I think somebody on the Biden team has finally said, maybe we need to drop that term because, you got Thanksgiving and then you got Christmas coming up. So people are spending. And then now you have Christmas time coming up where, you're going to be buying gifts. And so people are seeing that, hey, man, I might actually have to cut out a family member as far as some gifts. Or I think Josh said the other day, right, that shrinkflation, you want to talk about that, the items that are, smaller for the same amount, right?
Yes. So went to the grocery store the other day and, I texted these cats. So it was picking up some things for one of the kids, a Christmas party, or they were doing something. And so I had to get it was like little peanut butter filled pretzel bites, stuff like that. They come into big plastic containers. Those, and I had to get like a bag of Hershey Kisses. The bag of Hershey Kisses was the jumbo bag, right? It was when I picked it up, I was like, no, this is the small bag. Like, I don't need this because, you bought them in the past, especially around the holidays and stuff like that. Picked it up. The bag was noticeably smaller to where I said it was noticeably smaller to the point where I set it back down because I was like, that's the wrong bag, and started looking at it. That's a jumbo bag. I was like, hey, where's your big bag of Hershey Kisses? And, one of the worker bees, like, that's it. But it was still damn near the same price, like you said, as, the jumbo bag from a year ago, 2 years ago. So take a look at that when you're at the grocery store and stuff like that. Start looking at, the containers. Some of the containers are noticeably smaller.
Well, what y'all have to realize is that Josh does not get out of the house much, and he will admit that to you as he admitted to everyone else. It's like his wife makes him leave the house. It's like, bro, you've been here. Or not bro. I'm sure your wife doesn't call you bro. Honey, sweetie, babe, honey bunch, whatever. Okay, well, something. She calls you something, and it probably starts with an A and ends with an E. Fill in the blanks. But anyway, hey, you've been in the house for 3 weeks. You got to get out. But yeah, dude, I know we're coming up on the end here. So, what people are saying, the pundit, not the pundits, but people who know what they're talking about when it comes to inflation and shrinkflation, all this stuff, are just like people like the three of us and a lot of our listeners are realizing, why do I have all this money in savings? Why do I have all this money in savings? I need to either buy assets or invest in something that's going to give me a rate of return that's better than a savings account. Because holding on to your money right now, holding on to it in like a savings account is not worth it. It's not worth it because it's going to be worth less 6 months from now. So it's just like, I find myself doing that. It's just like, why do I have this money in savings? I need to put it somewhere. But anyway, yeah, inflation's a bitch. But so Christmas shopping, I've got a list. I think I've got a list, but I have not knocked much of it out. I'm not gonna say what Roger bought summer like I did not last year, but the year before. To ruin it because this will be the one episode she listens to. But I've got a list, but I haven't done a lot of shopping, so I'm gonna have to knock that out this week. And I'm sure we'll
Amazon,
record one more time. I know. But so, how are you guys doing on the shopping for Christmas? Are you feeling the spirit? I mean, we've decorated the house. The wife is home now. She's stressed about decorating the house. But how you guys feeling about Christmas?
I'm done, dude. I Amazoned everything. Like first week of December, it comes. I make my. So I think Josh said it earlier. Right? Or was it Luke said that you hate hanging up lights and wrapping gifts? It was Josh. Yeah. So I don't hang up lights. I have my son hang up the lights, and my wife and daughter decorate the house, and then I make my daughter wrap the gifts. So including her own gifts. So I just I leave them in the Amazon box so she doesn't see what it is and she can wrap it. And then she's like, okay, whose name goes on this? I'm like, yours. Or I just make her like Stevie Wonder it and just put one of those little sleep blinders on her eyes. Like, okay, you just gonna have to feel your way around this and just start taping some paper to the box. But got my shopping done earlier this year. I've still got one or two little things here and there I got to pick up. Nothing major, but dude, Amazon's a lifesaver, brother.
Yeah, I've got one or two gifts left to buy, and I'm rounds complete, man. I started picking up Christmas presents at the end of October.
Damn, man, you guys are ahead of the curve. I'm gonna give a couple of shout outs and then give it to Roger and Josh to close us out. But I just texted Robert. He hasn't found Mr. Chicks yet, Josh, but he found another place that's pretty good. He found, dude, Mr. Chicks may not even be open anymore, but he found another place
True.
he said is really good. Maybe if we ever make it to that area of the world again, we can hit the place that Robert hooked up for us. But he's going to spend his Christmas downrange. So Robert, man, dude, our hearts are with you. I check on you I don't check on you near enough, but you're in my mind, brother. Everyone who donated to the Snowdrop Ultra 55, I really appreciate it. You two guys, it means a lot to me. And Josh, we'll talk about that on the next one. Before I actually do it, Josh's commitment is kind of funny, but I really do appreciate it. Scott, all y'all appreciate it. Jed, Eric, I just Ryan, all the Ryans that listened, I appreciate y'all listening, and I'll kick it over to Roger.
So my shout out is going to go to Luke. So Luke gave us Christmas gifts, and it was actually pretty cool. It's like a wooden tray. It's like a foot long or something like that by 6 inches wide or whatever. But he has bottle caps in there, obviously label side up, and then it's acrylic, right? Like you poured acrylic on it. So I don't know what, like half-inch thick or anyway, super, super cool. Especially the fact that he made it, he dedicated his time to do that. But I was more impressed at his dedication to drinking the 50 bottles of Coors Light. He didn't even use high-end beer. He used Coors Light. Josh says he drank a lot of Zima to make his, but it wasn't even like high-end beer. Now I'm nitpicking on him, but he used Coors Light. So the dedication to drink, 50 bottles of that, and then the other 50 bottles of Zima for Josh. So, I mean, this is something that he's obviously had in the works for, it had to be for a couple months, but not just drinking all those bottles, but dude, the bottle caps were perfect. So it's like, obviously I know they're twist offs, but I always like mangle them, and a couple times you pop them off or whatever, but dude, thought it was super cool. So my shout out goes to you this week. And, again, thanks to all the listeners out there. I think we're hopefully we'll get another episode out before Christmas. And maybe on our next episode, we'll talk about something a little bit lighter than Houthi rebels and not being able to afford gas and Section 702. So we may have lost a couple of people in this one, but to all our canteeners out there, stay safe. Keep your canteen cups tightly secured.
Good stuff.